This is Land of Havilah. In this episode, we'll read the entire book of Amos and explain as we go. Amos is one of the Old Testament books of prophecy. We read from the World English Bible because it's not copyrighted and because it's faithful to the original Hebrew. The World English Bible has the quirk of using God's Hebrew name, which is Yahweh. Most translations give God's name as Lord, L-O-R-D, in all capital letters, but the World English Bible just keeps it as it is in Hebrew, which is Yahweh. Our name, Land of Havilah, comes from Genesis 2:11. It's a place with everything a person could want. Now, Amos chapter 1, verse 1. The words of Amos, who was among the herdsmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam the son of Joash king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. Comment in verse 1, Amos says he was a herdsman of Tekoa. He'll say later in the book that he also grew sycamore figs. His hometown, Tekoa, is about 16 miles south of Jerusalem. In verse 1, he says, these are his words which he saw. He had visions in which he both saw things and heard things. In verse 1, he prophesied these things in the days of Uzziah king of Judah and Jeroboam son of Joash king of Israel. In other words, he prophesied during the days of the divided kingdom, Judah on the south and Israel on the north. Israel of the north was also known as Samaria. Tekoa was in Judah, and Amos prophesied about Judah, but perhaps even more he prophesied about the north, and he lived in the north at least some, Amos 7:12. In verse 1, Amos says he prophesied these words 2 years before the earthquake. It's not clear whether he wrote the whole book at that time or just the beginning of it. The earthquake must have been severe because Amos and Zechariah refer to it and expect people to remember it. And according to Zechariah 14:5, people fled from that earthquake. The earthquake was roughly 760 B.C., so that was about the time Amos prophesied 2 years before that. In the north, Jeroboam II was king, as Amos just said in verse 1. Jeroboam II had a strong kingdom and expanded his territory, 2 Kings 14. So to the human eye, things were going well for the north in Amos's time, but to Yahweh's eye, things were going badly, as Amos will be telling us, so badly that Yahweh will soon call for an invasion of the northern kingdom that will kill 90% of them and scatter the rest, Amos 5:3. So it was a time of prosperity, but Yahweh's wrath was due, and many of them will live to see total loss and terror. Now going on, speaking of Yahweh, verse 2. He said, Yahweh will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the pastures of the shepherds will mourn, and the top of Carmel will wither. Comment in verse 2, Yahweh will roar from Zion. Zion is Jerusalem. As Yahweh put it, Jerusalem is the city he chose to place his name forever, 1 Kings 9:3. He roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem. When he speaks and roars from there, the pastures of the shepherds will mourn, and the top of Carmel will wither, Mount Carmel. This is just to say that when Yahweh speaks a word in anger, it's frightening and catastrophic from the plains to the mountains. This book is about catastrophe and why Yahweh is sending it, but at the end of the book, Yahweh says there will come a time of prosperity again. Now about the catastrophes Yahweh will shortly send, not right now on Judah and Israel, but to their neighbors, the surrounding nations, starting with Syria to the north, verse 3. Yahweh says, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, yes, for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron, but I'll send a fire into the house of Hazael, and it will devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. I'll break the bar of Damascus and cut off the inhabitant from the valley of Avon, and him who holds the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity to Kir, says Yahweh. Comment in verses 3-5, Yahweh is sending catastrophe to the Syrian kingdom based in Damascus, about 136 miles north of Jerusalem. Hazael and Ben-Hadad were kings in Damascus at different times. In verse 3, for 3 transgressions, even 4, end quote, Yahweh has multiple complaints against Syria, but he won't list them all. In verse 3, they threshed Gilead with instruments of iron. Gilead is the region east of the Jordan River. The Syrians threshed Gilead, meaning they invaded and were ruthless in the process. Yahweh will send fire on the house of Hazael and devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad, which means he'll put an end to the dynasty which is currently on the throne. He'll break the bar of Damascus, which means Damascus will be invaded and conquered. The bar refers to the bars of the city gates. The bars were thick wooden beams that slid in behind the gates to prevent the gates from being battered open. Yahweh will break the bar of Damascus, meaning invaders will break into the gates. Yahweh will cut off the inhabitant from the valley of Avon. Avon means wickedness. Yahweh considers Damascus to be a wicked place. He'll cut off the inhabitants, which means he'll kill them or displace them. Yahweh will cut off him who holds the scepter from the house of Edom. Edom means pleasure. In other words, he'll kill the Syrian king or displace him. And this is taking ironic note that the king lives in a house of pleasure, meaning he lives luxuriously, but he'll be cut off. Then the people of Syria shall go into captivity to Kir. Kir, K-I-R, is a city of Mesopotamia. The people will be taken captive to places like Kir. All this was fulfilled about 30 years after Amos predicted it. It was fulfilled in 732 B.C. The Syrian kingdom based in Damascus was conquered by the Assyrian Empire based in Mesopotamia. Rezin was king of Syria at the time, and Tiglath-Pileser III was king of Assyria. The Assyrians executed King Rezin and sent the population to places like Kir, roughly 600 miles away, and the Assyrians annexed all the Syrian land into Assyria. Going on now, Yahweh says the Philistines are due for judgment. They were on the coastal plain just west of Israel and Judah. Their cities included Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Ekron. Verse 6. Yahweh says, "For 3 transgressions of Gaza, yes, for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they carried away captive the whole community, to deliver them up to Edom. But I'll send a fire on the wall of Gaza, and it will devour its palaces. I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him who holds the scepter from Ashkelon, and I'll turn my hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines will perish, says the Lord Yahweh." Comment in verses 6 to 8, Yahweh will punish the Philistines. Punish them nothing. In verse 8, they'll perish altogether. Yahweh has 3 or 4 complaints against them, meaning multiple, but again, he won't name them all. One complaint is that the Philistines of Gaza carried a whole community captive to Edom, Edom being a nation southeast of Judah. The text doesn't say which community. It was probably an ongoing thing with various communities, probably communities in Judah. The Philistines captured whole communities and sold them as slaves to the Edomites. In verse 7, Yahweh will respond by destroying Gaza. In verses 7 and 8, Yahweh will cut off the Philistines in all their major locations, including Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines will perish, meaning even those who remain will perish. This was fulfilled starting about 15 years after Amos wrote it. The Assyrian Empire invaded and largely destroyed Philistia multiple times between 734 and 701. Nebuchadnezzar finished off the Philistines in 604, and the Philistines disappeared from the historical record. Yahweh goes on now to address Tyre, which was a powerful city-state 170 miles north on the Mediterranean coast. Verse 9. Yahweh says, "For 3 transgressions of Tyre, yes, for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they delivered up the whole community to Edom and didn't remember the brotherly covenant. But I'll send a fire on the wall of Tyre, and it will devour its palaces." Comment, the Assyrians set siege to Tyre about 40 years after Amos spoke it, between 724 to 720, and again in 701, and again from 677 to 671. Each time Tyre submitted to vassal treaties with the Assyrians. If the Assyrians ever burned Tyre, as verse 9 says, there's not a specific record of it. but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means we don't have record of it. Records of the time are spotty. If the Assyrians didn't fulfill the burning, the Babylonians did under Nebuchadnezzar in 572 BC, about 190 years after Amos. And the burning was fulfilled again when Alexander the Great destroyed Tyre in 332 BC. In verse 9, Tyre didn't remember the brotherly covenant. This was with Israel and Judah, we presume. King Hiram of Tyre had a long-standing friendship with David and Solomon and called Solomon his brother, 1 Kings 9:13. But apparently by Amos's time, Tyre forgot about that brotherly relationship they had with Israel. In verse 9, like Gaza, Tyre delivered up the whole community to Edom, and again, there aren't any more details. But apparently they were slave trading, and probably with Israelites as their victims. Now turning to Edom itself, verse 11. Yahweh says, "For 3 transgressions of Edom, yes, for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because he pursued his brother with the sword and cast off all pity, and his anger raged continually, and he kept his wrath forever. But I'll send a fire on Teman, and it will devour the palaces of Bozrah." Comment: Edom was a nation southeast of Judah. Its name comes from Jacob's brother Edom, also known as Esau, whereas Jacob was also known as Israel. Thus the Edomites and Israelites were brothers. In verses 11 and 12, Yahweh will not hold back from punishing Edom because Edom pursued his brother, we presume Judah or Israel, with the sword, and never let go of his grudge against him. He cast off all pity. Yahweh will send fire on Teman and Bozrah, which are major cities of Edom. Soon after Amos spoke it, the Assyrians subjugated the Edomites, and the Babylonians destroyed them about 553 BC, about 200 years after Amos spoke it. Now Ammon, the nation on the other side of the Jordan River, verse 13. Yahweh says, "For 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, yes, for 4, I will not turn away its punishment, because they have ripped open the pregnant women of Gilead, that they may enlarge their border. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it will devour its palaces, with shouting in the day of battle, with a storm in the day of the whirlwind. And their king will go into captivity, he and his princes together, says Yahweh." Comment: in verse 13, the Ammonites invaded Gilead, even ripping open pregnant women, for the purpose of enlarging their territory. Likely their victims were Israelites living in Gilead. In response, in verse 14, Yahweh will kindle a fire on their capital Rabbah, 45 miles east of Jerusalem. The fire will devour its palaces, meaning the significant buildings, with shouting in the day of battle. So no doubt it's a prophecy of military invasion, like all the other prophecies so far, and like most of the prophecies of the book. The Assyrian Empire will sweep through the area. Then after the Assyrians, the Babylonian Empire. Those 2 mega kingdoms will assault Israel and Judah and all the surrounding nations. The king of Ammon will go into captivity, he and his princes together. Shortly after Amos, the Assyrians subjected Ammon, and about 200 years after Amos, Nebuchadnezzar conquered and annexed Ammon. But exactly what happened to the Ammonite king and his leading men, there's no follow-up available. But we don't need any because Yahweh already told us in verses 13 to 15. Amos 2 is next.